This is the tragedy of a girl who didn't start as a villain, but was sculpted into one by loss. When we look at Jinx from Arcane, slapping the crazy label on her and moving on is easy. But as a therapist analyzing her behavior, I see something far more specific and heartbreaking than generic madness. We are looking at a textbook collision of complex trauma and personality fragmentation. The blue smoke, the talking guns, and the voices of Milo and Clagger aren't just random insanity. They are clues. Today we are diagnosing Jinx to understand why she isn't just a monster, but a survivor whose mind shattered in the only way it knew how to survive. Let's clear up the most common misconception immediately. You will often hear people label Jinx as schizophrenic because she hallucinates, but a closer look suggests this isn't typical schizophrenia. In schizophrenia, hallucinations can be bizarre, random, or disconnected from personal history. Jinx's voices are exclusively her dead family members. They are specific and historical. When she sees Milo, he repeats the exact insecurities she felt as a child, that she is a Jinx and a failure. This suggests her hallucinations are manifestations of severe, unresolved guilt rather than a biological brain disease. Her mind hasn't just broken, it is stuck in a loop of her worst memories. If it isn't simple schizophrenia, the foundation of Jinx's condition is likely C-PTSD, or complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Unlike standard PTSD, which often stems from a single event, C-PTSD comes from repeated and prolonged trauma involving abandonment or betrayal by a caregiver. Think about Powder's life. She lost her parents, then lost Vander, and then believed Vi abandoned her. That specific moment on the bridge didn't just scare her, it shattered her sense of safety in the world. The glitch effects we see in the animation aren't just style. They visually represent emotional flashbacks. When Jinx is triggered, she isn't just remembering the past, she is physically reliving the terror of being a small child left alone in the dark. Building on that trauma, Jinx displays classic traits of borderline personality disorder. The core of BPD is a frantic and terrifying fear of abandonment, which drives almost every decision she makes. When she lights the blue flare, she isn't just signaling Vi, she is testing her commitment. This also explains her intense jealousy toward Caitlyn. In Jinx's mind, affection is a finite resource, so if Vi cares about Caitlyn, it must mean she doesn't care about Jinx. This black and white thinking is called splitting. People are either saints who will save her, like Silco, or traitors who discarded her, with no middle ground in her emotional world. We need to talk about the ghosts, because Milo and Clagger aren't haunting her. They are parts of her own psyche warring for control. Milo represents her self-doubt and the Jinx label. Notice when Milo appears. It is always when she is trying to fix something or prove her worth. His voice is the internal critic telling her she will ruin it again. Clagger often appears as a silent, hulking pressure, representing the weight of the responsibility she failed to carry. These aren't random delusions. They are her survivor's guilt given form. Her mind has preserved them to punish herself and keep the pain of her mistake alive every single day. One of the most fascinating behaviors is Jinx holding full conversations with her guns, specifically Fishbones, the rocket launcher. Diagnostically, this is distinct from her hallucinations. When she talks to Fishbones, she often voices her doubts or moral hesitation through the gun. She'll say Fishbones thinks we shouldn't blow them up, or Fishbones says we should listen. She is projecting her own conscience onto an inanimate object because she doesn't feel safe owning those thoughts herself. It is safer for the gun to be the weak or cautious one than for Jinx to admit she is scared. It acts as a coping mechanism to manage internal conflict without breaking character. To understand Jinx, you have to understand Silco. Their relationship is toxic, but it is also the only thing that kept her alive. Silco didn't just adopt her, he validated her disorder. He told her that Jinx was perfect, essentially weaponizing her trauma. For someone with BPD who lacks a stable sense of self, Silco provided a rigid identity she could cling to. He became her favorite person, a psychological term for the individual a person with BPD centers their entire emotional existence around. Losing him was catastrophic because he was the mirror that reflected the version of herself she could tolerate living with. The central conflict of the series is the war between Powder and Jinx. This isn't multiple personality disorder, but a severe identity disturbance. Powder represents the vulnerable child who needs love, while Jinx is the defensive armor created to survive a cruel world. Jinx is loud and destructive, pushing people away before they can leave her. Every time she acts out, she is trying to kill Powder, trying to kill the part of herself that can be hurt. The tragedy is that she can never fully succeed. The blue braids, the gadgets, and the chaotic graffiti are all frantic attempts to scream that she is real, because inside, she feels like nothing. The dinner party scene is the absolute breaking point. Here we see the collision of all her symptoms, from the hallucinations of the dead to the fear of abandonment and the desperate need for validation. She sets the table with ghosts because to her they are just as real as Vi or Silco. Placing Vi in the chair labeled Jinx and Silco in the chair labeled Powder is her forcing them to acknowledge the duality she lives with. When she fires the weapon, it isn't a calculated choice but a panic response. Her stress levels exceeded her ability to cope, and her reality fractured completely. We cannot ignore the physical component. The Shimmer treatment she receives to save her life likely exacerbated her condition. Shimmer is a potent biological enhancement that increases aggression and alters perception. If her brain chemistry was already fragile due to trauma and chronic stress, flooding it with a substance like Shimmer acts like pouring gasoline on a fire. The purple eyes she develops aren't just aesthetic, they mark a permanent physiological shift. Her hallucinations become more vivid, her reflexes faster, and her paranoia more intense. It suggests that by the end, she is fighting a battle on two fronts: psychological trauma and chemical alteration. Later in her journey, particularly into the second chapter of her story, we see Jinx interact with Isha. This dynamic proves that Jinx isn't incapable of connection, she is desperate for it. Isha becomes a stabilizing force, much like Jinx was to Vi. Psychologically, this is attachment theory in action. When Jinx has someone to protect, someone who relies on her, her symptoms often become more manageable. She steps out of the victim role and into the protector role. It shows us that her madness subsides when she feels a secure attachment, proving that her condition is deeply rooted in relational trauma rather than just inherent insanity. Why does she blow things up or destroy the council? In therapy, we often see that patients with severe trauma engage in self-destructive behavior to reclaim a sense of control. If Jinx is the one causing the explosion, she isn't the victim of it. It is a way to externalize the chaos she feels inside. If she can make the outside world look as broken and chaotic as her internal world, she feels less alone. The explosions are her language. They are the only way she knows how to impact a world that has repeatedly ignored and hurt her. The moment she sits in the chair marked Jinx is the moment of integration. For years, she tried to be powder for Vi and a weapon for Silco. But in that final moment, she realizes neither can save her. Accepting the name Jinx is a tragic form of radical acceptance, where she stops fighting the label and decides to own it. It is a heartbreaking resolution, because it means she has given up on the hope of healing or returning to innocence. She accepts that she is the monster they created, not because she wants to be, but because it is the only identity that has never abandoned her. Comparing Jinx to Harley Quinn is common, but the psychology is different. Harley's madness is often portrayed as a liberation from social norms, a manic and freeing break from reality. Jinx's madness is heavy and burdened. Jinx doesn't find joy in the chaos in the same way. She uses manic energy to cover up profound depression. While Harley is often looking for fun, Jinx is looking for relief. Watch her face when the laughter stops, and you will see she looks exhausted and terrified. The manic pixie dream girl aesthetic she wears is a mask for a deeply depressed child who is tired of hurting. From a therapeutic perspective, Jinx was not a lost cause, but she was a victim of terrible timing. If Vi had returned 5 minutes earlier, or if Silco hadn't found her first, the outcome could have been different. This reinforces that mental illness in Arcane is environmental. Jinx wasn't born this way. She was made. With proper intervention, specifically trauma-informed therapy and a stable environment, Powder could have re-emerged. Her tragedy is that in the Undercity, there are no therapists, only enablers and enemies. She is a case study in what happens when a vulnerable child is left to navigate hell without a map. So what is the final diagnosis? Jinx is a young woman suffering from C-PTSD with dissociative features and borderline personality disorder, exacerbated by substance use and a toxic environment. But diagnoses are just words. The truth is that Jinx is a mirror held up to the failures of every adult in her life. She is the collateral damage of a war she didn't start. When she fires that rocket at the end, she isn't just killing the council. She is finally screaming loud enough for the world to hear her pain. And that is why we love her. Not because she is crazy, but because her pain is real. Jinx forces us to look at the uncomfortable reality of trauma. She shows us that monsters are often just broken children trying to survive. Her story isn't a glorification of madness. It is a warning about what happens when we abandon the vulnerable. She remains one of the most complex psychological portraits in modern media because she refuses to be fixed or simplified. She just is. If you want to see more deep dive psychological breakdowns of your favorite characters, make sure to like and subscribe.